Hey, good morning everybody. I just finished getting set up in here and watching an advertisement on Twitch again, which is always a surreal experience because they're just insane. Must be fun putting those things together. It's just like, how do we make this thing just like as mind-boggling and eye-popping as possible and present it in a way that no one will ever be able to not think about ever. Good morning! Hi, how's everybody doing? Let's see, who we got here? Rockraid, Wise, Bibine, Jester? Geister? I think I always mispronounce your name. I'm so sorry. Moobot! Always here. Shadowflame, Shadowflame 522. Ghost. I almost misread your name as Ghost Dad, but it's just Ghost. Stephanie!
Hello.
This is a group stream today. I was just kicking it off really quick.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving it a start.
Yeah, no worries. Just gonna run through the good mornings. We'll have to run through them again now that you're here, but no one will mind.
Good morning.
You know, I never turn these on because I always worry that they're like more blown out. So now we have like this. Ugh.
Yeah, no? Too much? Okay. Too much. So, like, I have this weird prejudice because my mom is always overexposing all of our family photos.
So it's just like that's your comfort zone.
Yeah,
it's like
it's like,
you
oh,
see that and
like,
it puts you in like a mental space where this is appropriate. Oh, I did switch the screen over, okay, for a minute, because like I was just telling you stream, I got super entranced by like this really flashy advertisement that Twitch showed me, and again, my cat's been waking me up at like 4 a.m. to tell me that he loves me. Aww, and that's great. Cool. I guess he's also just a big soft weirdo like that, and so like now I'm kind of like my start of the day is just a little bit fuzzy around the edges than usual, but he means well and he's a good cat. Here we go. Why did I look at it?
That is a little bit less bad than this one.
Yeah, I would agree. Like I would turn them all on and then look at myself in the preview window and be like, I'm like made of light now. This is great.
You're a luminous.
This is exactly what I've always wanted. Can I travel through the air really fast now? Ooh. Anyway.
Like Hyperlight Drifter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which I've been playing.
Oh my god.
Oh, it's so pretty.
Oh, so much cyan and magenta. So gorgeous. I love the rampant abuse of CMYK in that game. It's so good.
It's really
so
unusual.
Pretty.
And like I was telling everyone, like, oh my god, I really am not a fan of magenta. Cyan's okay, but this game is surprisingly gorgeous. Like
I have like a massive soft spot for like really cold reds, like really intense reds and cyan and really like fiery oranges all together, but it's just like to see them all used like all at like 255 all at the same time is just so good, so pretty.
Alright, also hello people.
Hello people, we're
and Keister and Timor and Turtle Squish. It's good to see you guys.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's just like I never know if I should. Yeah, it's the pronunciation thing. Every time. Every time.
I apologize.
Yeah, TPC, Turtle Squish, Durgish, Radiant Mally, Timor LW, That's Very Green, Spofio, and Tekreb.
And
Bruno Supremo. And this is an impossible to read yellow. Oh my gosh, what does this even say?
I can't tell. I would have to highlight that. Rink US Art?
Rink US Art. Rinkus Art?
Rinkus Art.
Rinkus Art.
Oh, I'm so glad you guys could join us.
Yeah, same.
I've been looking forward to the stream. So
very much so. It is a lot of fun to be back in the Wednesday stream.
Yeah.
Yep.
So one of my goals for the stream, and also tell me if you have any goals in particular.
It is kind of like, I mean, usually we come into these with kind of like a, hey, here's what we've been working on, here's what we're gonna work on today. So this is a little different since you know these are much further spaced out and they're more designed to be like a check-in with you guys. So less of a weekly project like we have done in the past and more of like an update where it's like, hey, here's what we've really been up to lately.
Right, exactly. So I guess maybe let us talk for a little bit about like a high level view of what we've been doing for the last month and a half, and then you guys can ask us all the questions that you like, and if we run out of questions, then maybe we can look at some of the stuff in greater detail.
Yeah.
But yeah, so from a very high level, we've spent all of January and all of February doing a few things. We finished off the 20, so happiness is with you guys. Like, and happiness and morale.
Everyone can now be happy.
Or very
just
sad.
Extremely content.
Yes. Content.
So content.
Determinedly content. Constantly content.
It's only going up.
Yeah, so that's really cool, and I've enjoyed seeing how that has affected my own play of the game. And then, of course, we're also working on Alpha 21. So we're about a week into Alpha 21's development. Alpha 21 is focused on traits, so it builds on happiness. So, like, what are some of the peculiar things that make this Hearthling different from that Hearthling?
Yeah, so it, like, introduces this system of diversity that you as a player can, like, appreciate and respond to, and it's also, like, steps in the direction of making the Hearthlings, like, more individual and less like little mindless drones and more like little characters with effectively wants and needs that are peculiar to each of them.
Exactly. So traits got kicked off with Richard, who did a whole lot of the design. In fact, here on one of the Thursday streams, and then Nikki's been working on the UX for it, both like the wireframes first and then the visual stuff. And she's actually streaming tomorrow night, so you may see some of her work there. And in the meantime, Albert has been working on sort of like the components and the infrastructure for how to represent traits inside the game. And then he distributed the actual implementation of each trait to like Chris and Linda and Carl and Angelo and Justin. So they all like took some traits. So they're all working together on that, which is actually pretty cool. In the background, Alpha 21 also has ongoing projects associated with it. One of them is a performance-related project that Chris has actually been working on for a while called the Topology Reachability Service. And we can talk more about this later, but basically the very short version is that it reduces the load on the Pathfinder by a ginormous amount in certain situations where like Hearthlings can't figure out how to get where you've told them to go, and then like it basically breaks the CPU of your machine. So this should cause a lot fewer like random spike slowdowns in certain kinds of terrain orientations. And that's really exciting. Because I feel like, you know, a lot of people are just playing and they're like, why is my game slow? And it's usually because of something like this.
Everyone is thinking really, really hard at the same time all the time, every time something happens.
Yes.
Every single time.
Every single time.
Everyone is thinking about it.
And if you can get to if you can get to the object, like if you tell them to pick up a fallen friend or whatever, and that fallen friend is accessible, then it's fine. They think about it, but they get through their thinking really fast, they find a solution. But if they can't get to their fallen friend, they like stew forever. Like, and he also did a Thursday stream about this, and so this is really cool. And then I guess in the background, we also have two long-running projects that are not part of any alpha. They're just sort of like in the background trying to figure out where we are and where we're going. And one of them is Richard's ongoing quest to figure out like how to tie all of our gameplay systems together, the existing ones that we already have, and also I would say like what the overall motivation is for your Hearthlings, like from the very first moment that they embark all the way until the end. So like we asked Richard Hill, hey, like what should the end game look like? What should Titans look like? How should that be? And he was like, well, in order to really understand a question like that, you need to understand how the whole game works together. So like if the goal of the Titans is to like, you know, like ruin your town, or is to cause like the goal of the Titans might be to ruin your town, and they might cause you to band together with other like, you know, distant nations or whatever, and all these things, they have repercussions back through the game, and so you want the whole game to be this cohesive narrative. So he's looking at the macro gameplay motivations in addition to the day-by-day ones. And Ali's also been working on a project that also transcends alphas, which is to say, how do we make our game more warm, to better convey tones of warmth, heroism, and mystery? Like, what can we do? How can we look at our game, and what sort of concept art could illustrate where we want to go with our game's like eventual total complete artistic style, to achieve, to make you feel like the Hearthlings are real people, and to make you feel like Hearth is a mysterious place that has these really warm moments inside of it.
Yep, and that's similarly to what Richard's been doing, not a thing that you can piecemeal out from the get-go. So it's been like, it's been one of those tasks where it's like we have to think about like how everything is going to work on the whole, and it's like while we have all of these elements to it, like within gameplay and within the game itself, that feel like they're like kind of shifting around, kind of on uneven ground, while everything is like settling into strange configurations and we're trying things on and ideas. Sorry about that. I forgot to silence my phone and it just scared me. I'm not going to do that again. Anyway, so like from my perspective right now, it's really very much about encapsulating the tone and seeing what it is that we do already and figuring out like what is successful about it, and then how do we take that to the next level. And it's very much like figuring out how everything all looks at the same time rather than very like one thing at a time going, and today we're gonna draw monsters. Because if you like go over in one little corner and you're like, okay, I'm gonna like make these goblins so cool, you will then put them into a scene that was also developed on islands for like literally everything, and nothing's gonna match each other. So it's like really taking a look at that broader scope of the entire thing and impossibly trying to raise as much of it up at the same time as you can, which is very difficult because there's a lot of things in Stonehearth, but you don't have to touch everything at the same time. You just have to touch the things that start laying in like main beats and ground rules that anchor the tiny things going forward. So like the look and feel of like color on a landscape at the whole will then inform decisions you make about color down the pipelines, and as you expose rules that make sense and carry through to all these different like little corners and like tiny little islands, like pulling them into like this huge more major mass of the entirety, like that's where you start like writing those things down and taking notes, and you can start actually seeing palpably like how things chain together and make more sense. And that is effectively how you create the story of the style guide and how you grow that. But it's absolute madness and chaos in the beginning because you're just looking at all these things and trying to do everything at the same time, and it's really confusing. But it's also a lot of fun because you get to like be like, oh, here's Stonehearth, now how do we make it like super awesome? And like when you are working on a game that's basically about a team of like a little team of people and like really warm and fuzzy notes like community building and like raising a kingdom and, you know, working together to take out odds, it's like it's a very heartwarming game. It's a very heartwarming project. So even at its most puzzling, it's never a bad time.
And for this, you started like I think really this first came up when we were like trying to add assets. Maybe it was sometime last summer. And we were like, oh my god, we don't know what color anything should be.
Well,
we don't know what shape anything should be. It
was like around last April, May, June, somewhere in like early summer when I finally came onto the team full time. So before then, I was kind of like one foot in two projects, and I came over full time and essentially started doing like the art lead role, which at the time it was just like me looking at Stonehearth going, cool, let's see what we can do. And like everything is everywhere. Like none of like our icons like are, for instance, our icons are like similar, but we don't really have like a consistent logic where like at a glance you know, hey, I'm looking at a buff, or hey, this is job skill, or hey, this is a family of icons that particularly portrays, like even within like our shops, like some of our items have stroke, some of our items are turned funny, and it's just like, okay, not a lot of consistency. What about our color story? There's not really one. What about like overall variety? Surprisingly, there's not a whole lot, so maybe that's a thing. So like it really did begin like with taking stock of what it is we already had and like just, you know, best practices kinds of things about how to shore that up and like complete that unto itself. So yeah, like things like color passes and like figuring out what shapes we are using and what shapes we were like kind of going overboard with, just to start creating like visual cohesiveness through the whole thing. And like even that was immense, though at the time it was less about like plumbing into the depths of it and figuring out like fundamentally what the art of Stonehearth is, because in my mind those rules had already been very much set and it was more of a matter of polishing. Like I don't know how well you guys can see the city picture in the background, but like that big city block poster, you can probably find it with a simple Google. Hang on a minute.
Stonehearth poster.
No, it always comes up, so I'm not too worried about it. Yeah, right there, immediately, in fact. Like, I think this image here, you guys have probably all seen this, but it's like, this represents an early aspirational dream of what Stonehearth could and should be. And I think that this poster represented a turning point in the project of like, how do we finish Stonehearth's visuals? How do we elevate Stonehearth's visuals? Because like, I don't remember if it was specifically for PAX or something, but it's like we got back to this poster. It's like, hey, so this was like our big super goal at one point. How has that changed, and can we update this to reflect that new goal? Like as we're like setting down pillars for what this project represents and like coming together under like a solid vision that like guides the course of the project moving forward, like does this 100% still fit? Where does it go? And like, and all of those things. And things just started ballooning from there, basically. Like, it turned out to be not a simple matter of just trading things around, and like, for instance, like, when we say that our game is warm and fuzzy, what do we mean?
What does that mean?
Like, it's like, everybody, when you say, oh, our game is warm and fuzzy, everyone goes, oh, yeah, it is, but everyone thinks of something different. Mm-hmm. So, like, initially, one of the biggest things was, like, really creating a team-wide understanding, like, getting feedback from everybody and collecting basically a visual reference for what it is it meant for Stonehearth when we say something is warm, or something is epic, or something is cool. And I did throw together, like, some mood boards to help with that.
Yeah, I was wondering if we could maybe...
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to, because I figured we'd talk about some of this, so I wanted to bring in some of it. Oh boy. Oh, here we go. Man, it has been a while. Hearthling Ortho, no. Plants.
Before we get into that, though, shall we look and see if there's questions from the chat?
Oh, yeah, let's do that really quick.
Do you guys have any questions? I saw Geester had a question about, well, did you end up deciding on a color scheme and stuff? Did you have a color spec done?
Did we have a color spec done? Not yet, but we have a general idea that what we have right now is definitely kind of like, at least like in the ascendancy, and we have like what we have right now feels kind of uniformly like green, yellow, and kind of dark. So freshening that up and giving it like more tones in there is going to be important. We have not set down in stone which colors live within particular palettes, not yet, but that is something that we're going to be like painting more art and exploring going forward. So unfortunately I can't share with you guys, this is our final color palette for Darkmoor Forest and the Desert of Palamum, but that is like totally a thing that is going to happen going forward. Unfortunately, it's like, that's not, like, even though that seems like an incredibly foundational thing, that's not even where we are yet, because of the scope of the entire project. Like, looking at it all from the same side. Now, very, like, from, like, a bird's eye view, I can tell you, it's like, oh man, so, like, in, like, the deep forest, I want to see, like, cooler, more shadowy greens, even though we can't really put the camera under, like, canopies of trees. Like, when you look at that, you should feel that kind of, like, calm and depth that if you're, like, wandering around in the forest, and, like, that'll also correspond to, like, a warmer green when you're out in the foothills, so, like, you feel like you're more out in the sun, but it should always kind of stay emeraldy, never really, like, snot green. And then, like, even the blue that you see there, because it's, like, when I think about the desert, I think about that, like, that cyan blue, so it's, like, I would like that to feel like a very, like, penetrating and cold, amazing teal blue to go with, like, those golden sands. And then when you're there under that kind of sky, it feels one way. And then when you're in the forest, it could be, like, more of a cornflower, kind of a reddish blue to go with those greens. And it creates a complement, and it also sets up a visual story that's distinctly different and places you in that environment versus the other one. Instead of going, like, well, the sky is blue, so we'll just use the same blue for all the different biomes, because it's like, we could do that. But color then is also being utilized as tool to kind of like place you emotionally within the environment, because I mean, why not? It is a means of communicating information, so we should absolutely use it. But these are, again, because we're still kind of looking at everything all at the same time, we are not at a place yet where it's like, definitely this gold for the sand, or definitely this brown for the mesas, and definitely this green for the trees. Just the ideas of, like, how temperature should generally work, and that we must have, like, visual distinction between these two areas as a means of, like, placing the player more effectively within an immersive environment.
Sweet. I guess sort of along that is Talion saying, what I think makes Stonehearth somewhat warm is the vibrant colors, the feeling that everything's alive. Other questions?
I would agree with that. And in fact, one of the things that I would really love to see is, like, more ambient activity in the scenery around you. Like, maybe every now and then a tree could rustle, or just some movement to the world to help push that vividness and that feeling like it is something that is alive. And it's not, I mean, yes, it's a blocky landscape, but it's like, it's not static.
Yeah, nothing's moving right now except the Hearthlings and the animals. And that feels kind of strange.
It's gotten to the point where I can take it for granted, but it's like when if I really, really think about it, it's like even the tiniest bit of movement in the environment would help, like, it would level it up so much.
Like, because in Link to the Past, Zelda's, like, flowers.
Happy bouncing flowers, exactly. Like, it's like, you know, you're not seeing, like, gusts of wind blow through the landscape and, like, rattling every single tree, but there are little touches like that where it's like, oh my gosh, look at this flower, it's going for it. Though arguably, like, with every single screen in that game, there is so much happening. Like, from the array of monsters, it's like a puzzle that you have to beat, and... Excuse me, etc. and so forth.
Alright, Clem Smith asks, did you choose not to use DirectX so you can easily go to Mac OS with opening? Yes, we wanted to use only technologies that were cross-platform so that when it came time to make the Mac and Linux ports, we would be able to do that relatively straightforwardly. So, yes. And I guess with regards to Mac and Linux, if you guys are waiting for an update with regards to that, so one of the things that we strongly thought about when we were thinking, oh hey, like first of all, we were like, okay, we should do Mac and Linux at the end, because if we have to keep every build, like, working across 3 different operating systems, that would be a lot of QA time. And we estimated that maybe it would be, like, an entire engineer's job. Like we'd have to hire a person whose sole job would be to update this all the time, if we wanted to keep it at parity. And so that's been sort of what we've been saying so far, like, expect a Mac and Linux port when the single-player game is more complete. That said, like, both Carl and Angelo are, like, super raring to go. They like, really, really, really want to work on this. And we've been like, hey, you've been here for, like, 2 weeks, so, like, let's, like, you know, get you into the engine and, like, then see what's going on. But I thought I should mention that you were not alone in really wanting a Mac and Linux port. Like, now I can say with sincerity that the team also really wants one.
Ooh, Vivian is asking a cool question about the space needs of Hearthlings being a problem for close-knit towns like the one on the poster.
Yeah, right. Sorry. Can you point it?
Oh, sorry. It's yeah. I assume that because I am looking at it, you are as well, because isn't that how the world works?
Right. So, we are trying to alter the space needs for Hearthlings so that they are content in aesthetically pleasing situations.
Yeah.
So right now, the space needs were calculated sort of independently from, like, say, the templates or ideal houses. And so Albert has a task on him, for example, to, like, make the rays go out long. Like, if I'm in a corner, like, the ray that is cast from my body that goes into the rest of the room that is not constrained by the corner should be longer so that I can reclaim that volume. Like, and so it is only required that, like, the room be of a good proportion, not that I constantly be in the center of it. So we're going to keep tweaking now that we have a mechanism for calculating space, we're going to keep tweaking how we use that mechanism so that people can be happy in towns like the one that...
Yeah,
in cozy, cute, close together towns. Because we also believe that the game actually looks and is more... Like, it looks more interesting, and it is more interesting if your town is, like, clustered close together, because then
like density, it looks so lived in. It looks so busy, like delightfully busy, not like, oh, it's so busy I can't look at it.
Right. And then from a gameplay perspective, if your Hearthlings don't have to travel so far to interact with each other and to interact with interesting things in the world, then that cuts down a huge amount of, like, lag in the game. Like, just imagine if your Hearthlings had to run for 15 minutes to get from wherever it is that they were to the thing that you wanted them to do. Like, it would feel kind of gross. So we don't want that to happen. We want the game to feel like, oh, this person should do this, and then within a reasonable amount of time they should be doing that, unless you've specifically placed your houses 15 miles apart from each other, in which case, well, that was up to you. But, you know, that shouldn't be how you feel you have to play the game.
I also feel like this scene, like, this scene is a little misleading even, because it's like when you look at it, you're like, oh, look at all these tiny houses, and they're all so close, but it's like, actually within the scope of Stonehearth tiny homes, these guys are actually pretty big.
They're huge.
They're really, really, really big. Like, I was just looking at it like, yeah, what are going to happen to the tiny houses? But it's like,
nope.
These are actually, like, at least twice the size of what is normally, like, a cozy home. And it's like
the smallest house here is maybe the size of
This is bigger than our tier 2 townhouse.
Oh,
like,
really?
It's a chunk.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, that's a door. These are, like, 2 windows with spaces and columns on the side. This is a monster.
Sure. Okay.
Like, this guy, like, holy cow. 2 stories. Oh, man, this would be... Oh, we can do that. Oh, cheating. But the other thing that I think is, like, on one hand, having a concept that it's like, oh man, this home that I'm building is going to make my Hearthling unhappy. Like, I don't think the goal is ever that something you make is going to make your Hearthling miserable. But also, like, I like that there's an opportunity here to kind of, like, challenge how it is we make very cute houses within our game. Because it's like, with our templates, we lead by example, and so far that example has been pretty unstructured. It's just kind of like, hey, I think this looks cute. So now it's like it's not even really a constraint, but it's a consideration. And it changes the way so far that because I've spent a ton of time in the building editor just like coming up with cute templates, but it's changed the way that I approach it, because it's like, hey, now I need to consider that the floor size needs to be, you know, X in order for my Hearthling to like get the most out of this space. Again, not that it's going to punish me for making the other decision, but I'm gonna get like a happier Hearthling for it if I consider this. And then it's like, if I know that I like the density of having walls this big, how do I now create a house or approach creating a house to like make it quaint and make it adorable? And the solutions that have come out of that are things that I would not have thought to build in the first place. And I think going forward, as we continue to like update our templates to more accurately like reflect, you know, again, the system probably needs tuning still to more accurately reflect those things. Like, the templates essentially are designed to, give everybody like cool houses that they don't have to build themselves. Neat. But also it's to like lead by example and expose cool ways of using the build editor and inspire you guys to try on different ideas for yourself. So like, I'm excited by what is going to happen to the look of our houses, but I don't, especially if we're looking at this image as an idea of what a cozy town looks like, I definitely don't think we're in any danger of like losing that cozy quaintness that really, to me, is very Hearthling.
Yes. I saw something from White Leap Cat or something that was asking when we're going to update the roadmap. We haven't updated the roadmap. There we go.
Here we are.
So the roadmap and the Trello board are really, really, really out of date, and I apologize for this. We have not updated either of them since like May of last year, and the reason for that is that so
lies.
Yeah, right. The reason for that is a couplefold. To answer your actual question, what I would like to do is wait a little bit longer for sort of Allie's art explorations and especially Richard's gameplay explorations to shake out and land a little bit more solidly, and then make another version of this roadmap. I hope you don't mind.
We've talked about this, and good lord, I love tedium. I will absolutely draw a map.
So one of the reasons that we can no longer update this roadmap in a responsible fashion is when we decided that we needed to take a closer look at our core gameplay systems and also at our sort of like visual style, a lot of the percentage, this roadmap does not really reflect that work. This roadmap is a reflection of the work that we felt that we needed to do in 2013 in order to finish the game. And now it's like, okay, we did most of the work on this roadmap, everything like except for multiplayer. We did what we thought were most of the monsters and denizens. We did most of what we thought were the game master, and we did most of building. And we were like, the game still feels somehow deeply unsatisfying. Like, it's a lot of fun in like certain situations, but it hasn't yet like gelled as a game yet. And so what do we need to do that? And in order to do that, we need like basically the scope of the roadmap has expanded, I think, for the betterment of the game. And that means that we need a new picture, and that means that we need a new list here, and everything that goes along with it. So hopefully we'll have another roadmap like soon, and we can't update this one with our progress because our progress is not reflected by the things on this roadmap.
Yeah, it's pretty disproportionately out of bounds at this point.
Yeah. Exactly. So yes, you're right. The roadmap is out of scope because there's so much more to the game. And the same is true for the Trello board, a little bit less so because it's like, oh, well, the Trello board at least recorded things and there's still those things that we want. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
I'm actually really looking forward to comparing this map with wherever our new map winds up. Just to like see, because again, it's like when I look at this, I see a time capsule of essentially it's like, this was a remarkable, like, aspirational, this is where we're going at one point. And, like, it's so phenomenal. Like, I feel like in such a tiny, short period of time, how much this is, like, expanded, not just from it's like, hey, we now have the possibility to think bigger, but like actually seeing what it takes and experiencing the team as a whole making steps toward that thing. And it's exciting to think about like the full ramifications that has for Stonehearth as a game that's not just like a really, really charming toy. Like my initial experiences with Stonehearth is like I love being in this space, but like adding things to it that make it continuous and make it sticky and make it stick with you, and like as a storytelling device and all these things. So yeah, I'm super excited and curious and really looking forward to it.
So TechReb asks, like, when are we gonna make Stonehearth online or make multiplayer? You guys actually, so Richard is, one of the things I asked Richard is, hey, like while you're considering the overall gameplay motivations for the player, could you spend some time on thinking about what multiplayer could be like?
It'll be easy.
It'll be easy, right? No. And Richard was like, so he is actually, one of the things he's doing as a part of examining, like I said, the meta of like your player motivations of why you're playing the game from beginning to end, is looking at what multiplayer actually means. Because if you ask even different people on the team, you'll get different answers about what we think would be cool multiplayer, and so he needs to spend some time exploring the space and seeing what comes out. And like, I think, you know, you should really ask him about it. Really, at this point, we are at the thought experiment level. We're not even at the like, hey, here's a prototype, let's try playing it level. I think what you see is there's people who feel like you should be building a town together with your friends, building the same town. There's people who feel like that you should have one city and your friend should have another city. There's people who feel like we should always be in the game at the same time. There's people who feel like, hey, we should have like asynchronous cities. So like I'm over here playing on my game and Allie's over there playing on her game, and then every now and then there's some way we can sync up, like we can trade things or what have you. And then there's a lot of attendant complications associated with any and all of these that he's sort of like working through and considering. So I would not expect to see multiplayer like actually in the game, like in a playable fashion, until we answer some of these fundamental questions. And I think any of these things are possible, but Richard's job is to see which of them would be the most enjoyable. Because we could certainly add multiplayer and it's a sandbox and you can do whatever you want, but that feels a little bit irresponsible to me. Like, or at least that would be like a last resort. Like, hey, we just put this in here. We don't know if it actually contributes to the game, but I hope you have fun with it.
That's really the main thing, is like finding a system that's not just fun, but like fits the overall like why of like what is it doing in Stonehearth? Why is it important to Stonehearth? And making sure it's not just like, well, here's your multiplayer, ta-da, it's done. Because it's like, I mean, I think anything you drop in would be fun to a point, but it's like you should definitely take the opportunity to make it meaningful, and that's what makes its genesis so terrifically difficult, because there are so many darn solutions.
Yes.
And just not any of them are going to just magically work. You know, it's something that takes a lot of work.
I think the other thing that he's discovered in his explorations is he's been trying to look for games like Stonehearth that have multiplayer inside of them, and that is a multiplayer that is really enjoyable and not just like, oh, here's multiplayer for multiplayer's sake, and he's having a lot of trouble. So if you guys have suggestions about how you feel multiplayer should be, or if you've played a game in this sort of genre in which you control a group of people and have significant multiplayer experience with another person also controlling a group of people, please like let him know on Discourse. He's at Brackar, and I'm sure he would love to hear from you about it. Because, like, for example, multiplayer Terraria, awesome. Multiplayer Minecraft, awesome. But in these games, you're controlling one person.
Yeah.
And so
it's single player adventure forever with your friends.
Exactly. So that it's like, you can imagine it's like, oh, it's like WoW, except like World of Warcraft, except I'm building instead of like, you know, killing 10 rabbits or whatever. But the abstractions are really complicated the minute you get to the control of multiple people. So yeah, and like, you know, we're not an RTS, and we're not like Age of Empires exactly. Like, those are different genres. This is a much more intimate genre. I've started to think of it as like community building, because that was actually Allie's awesome phrase. But it's like you've literally got like, you know, somewhere between 5 and maybe 50 people, and you care about all of them. And this is not like some abstract numbers game you're playing. No, this is about these people and their circumstance and if there was multiplayer, how these people interacted with those people. And so what does that mean? Yes. Okay.
Alright, anything?
So what ideas do we have for building the world, asks Taylun. What ideas do we have right now? Will it be like voxel planet?
Where's...
Round with the core?
Okay.
And everything, can you dig down or still no idea? Right, so, I think that the world will always be, like, the map that you play on will always be somewhat constrained in the sense that the bigger the map is, that you're not, like the map should always be on some level constrained to the active part of the map that you are using. Because if we, like, detailed the rest of the world without you, like, actually going there, then there's this enormous drain on your CPU that is not helping you at all. And so if we do explore different parts of the map other than the area where you start, it would be very mindfully. Like, oh, it's because, like, you went there. Oh, it's because you opened a portal to there or something like that. Yes. Any news about the Northern Alliance?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah. If we do this right, though, it would be useful to actually, like, peek ahead and consider that while scribbling down ideas for our current 2 biomes. Because the thing is like, if indeed we are looking at these things as like this is a cornerstone kingdom in our series, then it really is incredibly irresponsible to not consider them in the umbrella of the whole as we're doing like our concept art and explorations, because they're not just the main 2 kingdoms are Raya's children and the Ascendancy, and here are our new friends, the Winter Snow people. Like they're supposed it's not an expansion. Yeah. It's the 3rd kingdom. So like that is something that's been kind of bothering me, is like we really don't have and that's not true. There are actually like tiny little like nuggets about the Northern Alliance hiding in the vast disorganized mess that is all of our working files, and like I sometimes find things that I never knew were there, because why would you put that there? I don't know what that means. But it's like there's like a screenshot of like a snowy landscape, and I was like, oh, where did this come from? I've never seen this before. That's awesome. So like that's an important thing that needs to be like moved into the initial explorations, rather than like, okay, don't think about this right now, we'll get to that in a minute, because it's like that represents another point of contrast with the other 2 things conceptually. And you know that's going to have like gameplay implications for sure. Like what does it mean to actually like play in the glacier versus the desert versus the Ascendancy? And it's like with an eye to that, and again with an eye to overall tone, how then do you go in and like describe this thing visually so that you communicate, you know, not just immersion and a pretty glacial landscape to the player, but like the sense of what it means to pick that biome and play as this kingdom.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They're really important.
Right, and I think you'd sort of see them too, like, from a gameplay perspective, at some point we're gonna go back and figure out, hey, what is the key mechanic that we'll revisit the key mechanic that distinguishes the 3 biomes from each other, the 3 kingdoms from each other, and see where the Northern Alliance sort of, like, fits in there. Like, our initial plan was something like, you know, the Ascendancy has really great, like, builders, and, like, the, Raya's Children has really great crafters, and the Northern Alliance would have really great fighters. And so, you know, that was the core premise, and we were working out toward that, and it's like, well, Richard's like, hey, let's just take another look and make sure that that's still sane, that it feels good to play, like, all that stuff.
Yeah. Are the Raya's children actual childs?
Well, I suppose at some point they were childs, but
everyone was childs once. But only once. No, I mean that's I guess it's reference to Grandmother Raya, the character that is essentially like I guess the word,
like the progenitor.
Yeah, there we go. Like at the beginning of everything, there was just this one really, really crafty, awesome lady that was like, yes, we will tame this desert and raise up our super cool city via means of trade, and like essentially these are like the descendants of her followers, of her people and everything, and so they are Raya's children. Probably not all literally her children, that would be extreme, but
I think of her,
it speaks to her importance as like a figurehead in their society.
Exactly. Like Cosmeo de Medici, like, basically made himself the, like, grandfather of everybody in Florence. Like, he wasn't actually related to them all, but he found ways of making himself related to them all so that they all looked up to him and been like, hey, dude, can you help us with our trade? And this is how he ended up running Florence. Much in that way, yeah. I think. Taylin says, I hope someday Hearthlings will react to temperature. It's freaking cold here, so we go hunt animals
yes.
and fur. Yes, and in the meantime, you can play Frost Feast, because they actually do.
Oh, it's so depressing. Okay, no, Frost Feast,
really
Frost Feast is not depressing, but it makes me so sad when they're all sick and cold, and, like, I, like, had this insanely dramatic moment where, like, it was nighttime, it was dark, I didn't know, I settled on top of a mountain, and there were no herbs. There were no herbs anywhere, right. Except for, like, 3 mountains over, and I remember like sending my freezing healthiest Hearthling out because the rest of the town is so sick, and by the time he's like got them and he's coming back, he's like running real slow because he's so, and I'm like, there's so much drama happening right now, I'm gonna start crying, I'm so worried about all of these kids. But yeah, they get cold. If that's what you're looking for.
That just means that when you manage to make heaters for them and they're all
it's so rewarding.
Heaters, like it's the best.
So rewarding. It's just like heaters for days, 8 heaters in every tiny apartment. No one deserves to be cold.
Danja says, on the subject of multiplayer, allowing people to colonize the map like in RimWorld, adding a multiplayer to it so you can actually do either trade between them or attack and build together with the other player. Yeah, I think that would be really interesting. I think that is definitely one of the things that Richard is currently exploring. I think that if you actually had any thoughts about what happens when only one of you is playing, what happens to the other person's city? Like, do you have to be in the world at the same time in order for your city to exist? Or is it like Minecraft where I build a giant sculpture, but I have to log out, and it's totally okay for other people to like blow up my sculpture while I'm not here? Like, and keep in mind the Hearthlings too, like what happens to the Hearthlings that you control when you are not around? And I think that is sort of like some of the hard problems at the kernel of that gameplay idea. And hard problems mean that there's really interesting things to be said there, so just please, if you have any further ideas on that, that would be really cool.
I personally think it'd be really unsettling to go to my friend's town and just find everybody idling.
Yeah, that would be
just staring
weird.
Off into space and just be like, are you zombies?
Like, in Clash of Clans, they all, like, run into a central house, so you can't get to them while you're attacking them. But anyway, yeah, it raises all kinds of interesting questions. So when you talk about the kingdom's background stories, I get to think, is that something that will be presented in the game in some way? It's presented very mildly right now in the flavor text inside the recipes, but I would really love for it to come out more in the landscapes and in the
Exactly. So for me, like, if art can accomplish nothing else, art wants to help make the world feel more like a world and less like a sandbox. Like, this isn't just a desert. This isn't just a forest. You know, you should be able to see things about it and to unearth things about it through flavor text, through items, through markings in the sand, through, like, the way the mountains have formed and the types of monsters you see there that tell a story about the world. The question is, like, because, again, there is an aspect to Stonehearth that is, like, mysterious, like a secret little toy box where it's like, as you interact with it, you both find out more about it and you also, like, attach meaning to it as well. So, like, to how far do we, like, push that balance? Because it's like, we definitely want the place to feel solid and whole with mineable secrets and artifacts, so to speak. But it's like, we don't want, like, an NPC to come up and then, like, bog down your screen for 20 paragraphs with, like, a long, tedious story about a thing that happened because, you know, you're in the middle of your game and you've got things to do. So it's like, having those things as being explorable and being evident that tie the world together in a very satisfying way is something that I personally want to make sure happens.
Right.
And in a way that is like, if when you're playing Stonehearth, a priority for you as a player is finding out more about the world of Stonehearth, that is something you can do. But there's not going to be, like, points in the game where it's like, hey, it's your 3rd playthrough, and here's that NPC again, and now you've got to go on this side quest because you have no choice, and you're really not interested in exploring this right now. Like, it's not going to force it down your throat.
Yeah.
But, you know, overall, like, I think, yes, the game definitely has lore in it that should be evident to a point that it makes the worlds feel like whole unto itself.
Sure. Durgish asks, are we planning to add real ships? I think the answer is honestly no. Like, if you would like to have ships, I think you should go for the ships and make that mod. But, like, we are so far away from thinking about, like, sailing the ocean that I'll say no at the moment. Just put a stake in one thing we're not doing. But Boat Town.
Boat Town.
This is true.
See, I know, okay. Like, I'll hold it in my heart.
Imagine one day an expansion to Stonehearth, if we ever get that far, like Boat Town, the expansion. But I think it would.
And everyone and all the Hearthlings are like rad seafaring folk.
Yeah, exactly.
And they all have parrots.
Pirate Hearthlings.
They're now my favorite.
Yeah. So, Danjo says maybe a SimCity approach where the tile gets simulated as soon as you visit it, so they do their job automated, so they have soldiers on guard, necessary to keep your village alive, even defense towers to protect you properly. Yeah, and I think that's pretty interesting. That is a design, like, one of the many design choices, and that has some really interesting effects to it. Like, you can imagine, like, okay, like, how smart are your guards? How smart do they have to be? Like, could your guard, if you were not there, could your guards ever be smarter than, could the orders you leave them ever be smarter than the actual intelligence of the other person who's playing at that time? So yes, lots of interesting possibilities down that road. We could totally have parrots anyway.
Yes. See, Sarandries and Geister, you guys are speaking my language.
So I guess we're 50 minutes into this sort of conversation. Would you like to show some of the, like, maybe mood boards and stuff?
Sure, I can.
And
I've got, like, the fun fluffy paintings that I did. Oh, that's icons. That's related to traits, because we had this sentence of a thought yesterday. It's like, well, if we run out of time, we can work on icons. I don't think we're gonna run out of time. The question is did we want to look at, like, the original old mood boards that were just like, I threw things in a Photoshop doc.
Yeah.
Did you guys add stuff to it, or did we want to look at, like, oh gosh, this is so different?
I think start with the mood,
because they're very similar. They're very similar, but so it's like, I don't know if it would turn out to be redundant, but I mean, we can just, like, take one and go.
Yeah, dude, I like these. They're, like, when you say old, I mean, like, you made these, like, in November.
It feels like an eternity. But yeah, so, like, the purpose of these is to, like, capture our influences and images that, like, inspire the same kind of idea, like, and it's an abstract thing to think of. Like, I remember even when, like, the concept of a mood board was first proposed to me many years ago, I was like, that sounds incredibly strange, but it's like, it is a little weird on its own, because it's like, it's ultimate scrapbooking, essentially. You're, like, going around and you're collecting images that as a whole tell kind of a visual story. So it's not like any one of these images has significance totally unto itself, but when you look at them all together, it creates a tool that better defines a concept like warm. So when I say Stonehearth is warm, this is the kind of warm I mean. This is the kind of, like, coziness and light and glowing and friendliness and, like, the quality of the light, the density of the structures, like the tactileness of the way things feel.
And just to set the context again, because it's been, like, 40 minutes, like, we were trying to figure out how to bring this artistic cohesiveness to the world.
Yeah, so,
right?
yeah, we're talking about, like, looking at the art of Stonehearth and thinking, okay, how do we level this up? And then, so essentially part one is, like, let's make sure that when we talk about Stonehearth, we're all talking about the same ideas.
Right.
So, like, if I say warm, I'm thinking about this, but Stephanie is thinking about something completely different.
Like beaches.
Yeah, like beaches. And it's not wrong,
right,
but it helps us communicate effectively as a team to have mood boards as a tool for us to, like, rally around.
Right.
So it's like, hey, when I say warm, this is what I mean. So at this phase, like, I'm throwing together a bunch of stuff that I'm finding. It's like, obviously we have, like, our initial influence, like, Legend of Zelda and like, everywhere all the time. But also just, like, artwork and colors and things. And it's like, some of these things, again, on their own are like, well, why in the world is that there? But when it's, like, all together within the rest of the image, all of it comes together to, like, tell the story of the concept of the feeling. So the other thing that's important to note about mood boards is that nothing on here is like, this is what our art style is going to look like. It's more about describing tone and less about describing like this is how we're going to draw things. That's more of the job of a style guide, and that's got different rules to it. Whereas again, this is definitely more about building up a communications device and an overall sense of tone that we can like objectively look at and add to. And again, when I first threw these together, it was opened up to the rest of the team. It's like, hey, what do you think about this concept, this idea, this emotion, essentially? Well, let's describe an emotion. That's great. That's easy. Try and find like words or images or even just a color swatch, anything that helps like sum that up and throw it in here. And when we look at it all together, let's see what that expression becomes. And we did this for a few concepts. Like we had warm, the concept of scary in Stonehearth, which is hard to think about because it's like we want our game to like not be a punishing hellscape. So these sim games, like humorously and hilariously, they have like a penchant for this kind of like funny where it's like things just get worse. And it spirals into this, like, really funny to tell the story later, but actually horrifying if you're attached to your little beings. It's like, and then they all died of a weird, freaky shadow disease, and all that was left were piles of clothes on the ground. The end. It's like, no, that's not what we want. So it's like, when something in Stonehearth is scary, what do we mean by that? And it's like, when we compare it to warm, what we're more talking about is like, yeah, I mean, there are bits in there that like, ooh, that gives you the chills. But it's more about like interesting like prompts and ghost stories and things like that. Features in the landscape that draw you in, and like in your heart you're like, maybe this isn't a good idea, but I can't help but want to go check it out.
Yeah. Like, how could you resist finding out what's up with that tree?
Like what is happening here? It's like,
who is that rabbit?
Do these guys mean well, or is it just like what the heck is the shadow of the pylon about? It's like this looks a lot like teeth. Should we go in there? And it's like, this isn't necessarily scary, but it's the same kind of thing. And honestly, this scene right here is something that has stayed with me from my childhood as something terrifying, actually. Maybe it's nothing, but this tree feels kind of strange while we cut it. Then why are you still cutting it? Is what I'm just like,
don't do it.
Don't do it. Is it a person? I was like, that has always haunted me. It has always haunted me. Like I remember the first time I got to that and just being like, I'm noping out of here. And it's like examples of going way too far. It's like, again, we don't want to create like terror and blood and death and things like that. So it's like, even if it's like a goblin camp or something like that, it's like it's more of it in the sense of like tribalness and mischiefness and them celebrating their really hilarious goblin culture, which is different unto the Hearthling culture, but not explicitly like covered in like heads on pikes and things like that. They're really
the dark side of the Ascendancy. The Ascendancy is derpy optimistic, and the goblins are selfishly, greedily optimistic.
Yeah, and they take so much pride and honor in all of this, and it's adorable, and I love them. They're my favorite. So yeah, it's like scary really became more of this concept of like intrigue and mystery and creating the right amount of tension between what is safe and what is known. And what draws you away from home to explore, because right now, like, one of the things that I'm addressing, and I need to address honestly more in depth as a project of its own, is that when you begin a game of Stonehearth, the world very much feels like it's laid out for Hearthlings. Like, everything is already in neat little rows. It's already perfectly recognizable as like, yeah, I can go over that tree and cut it down. I can climb up that foothill and mine into the mountain, and it's fine. I know exactly what to expect. And there's a level of comfort in that. But it lacks the kind of tension that fuels the story of embarkation. Like, you get there and the world is already laid out for you. Well, what kind of story is that other than, like, well, here's a list of things to do, and I guess I just grow my town until I'm out of options.
Right.
And so it's like, how do we, like, turn the world into a place that has more of this, like, push and pull?
Right.
So like ghost stories come to mind, mysterious features in the landscape, just all kinds of stuff like that. And once again, to iterate, mood boards are not style guides. So even though like this is a voxel deer with a skull for a head, that's totally like our stuff. It's like, no, it really isn't. This is someone's art, and that would be really crappy to be like, yeah, we're totally gonna do it like this. These are never like, okay guys, let's draw like this now. it's only to capture and illustrate tone and setting and things like that.
And allow us to converse.
And allow,
with each other
mostly
them.
These are communication tools to be used within the team and to help generate the overall like flow and tone of our style guide moving forward. So I feel like I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but it's like, whoa, what happened? Windows, you know what? That's really great. Now can you stop? Awesome.
So I guess, like, following on the mood boards, like, you then did some studies about, like, you had some, following on the mood boards, you made pillars for the art.
Block castles.
Oh, yeah.
No, just to like blow through these really quick. Like when I saw
take your time.
these block castles, I was like, yes, absolutely yes, because it's like these are super geometric and simple shapes and all these things. But the first thing I think of when I look at stuff like this is not blocks. It's I'm gonna build that.
Yeah. And then knock it over and then build it again, but different. And yeah. Oh, I love those books, those pop-up books.
Like, yeah, this person's art is so beautiful. I could look at their stuff all day. But just like this is what playing Stonehearth should feel like to me. Yeah. It's like it should absolutely feel like you could like curl up with a blanket or hang out with your family and friends and just like watch this amazingness unfold and be surprised by it and entertained by it and be able to come back to it and experience it again.
Interestingly enough, that is actually how Leighton feels to me.
Really?
Yeah, like that picture, like that sense of like, hey, there's a tiny book in my hand, because like the DS, it like unfolds and then there's a little town inside of it.
I do miss the clamshell. I have a 2DS, like the little wedge, but that's because I was like, man, 3DS. I love my DS, and then the new Pokemon game at the time came out for 3DS only, and I was like, well, twist my arm.
Thanks, Nintendo.
And then like Doom. Because it's like, hey, guess what? We have existential peril in this game. Now, how in the world do we address that without like turning this into something horrifying? And for me, like again, going along the ideas of like when we say scary, we mean like intrigue and ghost stories and things that like actually draw you in, not shove you away. Yeah. And the concept of Doom is something that is like, if you ask different people, they'll tell you a different story about it. So like I saw this thing in the clouds, and to one person said it resembled an enormous kraken, and one person said it resembled like a giant that tore a castle off of a hill. All we know is that it's not there anymore, and there's this huge footprint left in the ground. It's like imperfect remains, inconsistent accounts, like not explicitly here is a scary monster, because that is incredibly satisfying to design and fight one time, but as something that is like, how do you really maximize like the psychological factor of what it means to face a titan? Like, and because it's like no matter what it is we eventually realize that to be, the leading up to that and the impact that it has already had on the world and the lore passed around by the characters within the world is more important than the final product, because that sets the expectations. So when I was thinking of like what Doom is to Stonehearth, you know, aside from like, hey, there's an earthquake and now there's a canyon where your town used to be, that feels really bad. But again, especially in regards to like, you know, it's I think this has always been an idea that at some point the Titans take notice of your prowess and come to challenge you. It's like, what does that look like? Are they huge scaly monsters? And I always thought of this from the perspective of the Hearthlings, who possibly descended from other kingdoms and other stories that had faced or at least heard of ancient disasters along these lines. And like everyone just has fuzzy accounts. No one knows for sure.
Right. And I think when you talk about psychology, that feels very compelling to me, insofar as, you know, an earthquake doesn't have psychology. An earthquake just is. And if you're going to talk about Doom, then it's like, oh, the human tragedy of what happened afterwards. But one of the things that is universal to all these pictures is that element that the Titan is an embodied person. There's probably a really interesting story behind this person, this entity that is for some reason existentially threatening you.
Yeah.
And you want to find out why they're doing it and what they're doing. It's not just the earthquake, which is like, oh, and now there were some tectonic shifts in the ground, and there's no explanation, and it's just kind of terrifying, actually.
Exactly.
So yeah.
think if we were to go to... Oh, man, fantastic. I sure didn't name any of these anything useful. If we go here, we've got Tone Compelling. This is actually like a final mood board that sums up both scary as well as the concept of doom, where I started including just landscape features that had the same kind of compelling nature to them, not, you know, along with the idea of like, oh man, you espy something in the clouds, but like these are like remnants and things that happen, and you don't know how to sum them up, but you can sure tell stories about them. And it's less again of like, well, there's nothing I can do about this, and more of like, what do you do about this? What does this mean? Like, it raises questions and starts, you know, adding that tension and telling stories and instilling dread, instilling mystery, but not like outright, you're gonna die.
Right. I think that's what's so great about that giant, like, the gray blob there, like, because he looks like he's kind of just chilling, but the person beside him is so small, the power dynamic there is so big, you're like, oh, he might kill her just by falling over. Like,
yeah. Or it's like, well, what is the relationship here?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, it's like when you think of a titan, is it a huge, snarly, scary, like hundreds of teeth, thousands of claws, like monster beyond reckoning, or is it just a relationship of scale, or is it just like, oh man, it's just gonna come and eat all of our corn for the rest of forever, we will never have cornbread again. Yeah. We must stand and fight. Like, you know, this sounds like a Hearthling problem.
Yes, it does, actually. It sounds like an ascendancy problem.
And that's something that I want to see is like, you know, in terms of like storytelling and like what the marks that interactions with existential peril have left on the descendants of all of these kingdoms is like the stories that each of them tell about how their ancestors faced them down. Like, I could imagine like the Northern Alliance are like, yes, and we bravely stood up to them with our powerful warriors, and then the Raya's children would be like, yes, we were crafty and we outsmarted them, and we hid, but we also devised a clever trap that drove them away. And then the ascendancy was just like, they tried to eat all our cornbread. What did you do about it? It was terrible. But what did you do about it? There was no cornbread. But, you know, then it's like you have a lot of things, like both, it's like if you visit all three, it's like you might have clues as to what happened to this world and what's coming, but it also flavors like each kingdom in like how they approach the world and how they approach their problems, and it's another tool that helps define them. What else do we have here?
So these were a second iteration.
Yeah, these are a second iteration. So again, you see things in here that didn't make it to the first cut. You see things that got omitted. You see things that are added to it to like better flesh out certain ideas, like epic and Stonehearth is like adventuring and like cool rock guy. I love Legend of Mana. And this freaking chicken over here, oh my god. Okay, maybe, but again, it's like
if you didn't know why the chicken was epic, you just have to go.
Actually, for me, like, this pretty much sums it up. Like, when I see an old Nintendo manual, I immediately feel like I'm about to have an adventure. And that's, again, like, once again, to come back to the point of having a mood board, is like, it's not any one of these things on its own, and it's not a style guide. It's the interaction of all of these elements together and the feeling and the communication tool that it provides. Of course, like, awesome, beautiful town where it's, like, full of activity and just density and busyness, and that guy has a rad hat, oh my god. But yeah. Oh yeah, and the other thing that falls out of all of this is like it helps us flesh out like what Art's mission is to the rest of the game, and these are essentially like they are our pillars, which in itself is a big fuzzy word that means a lot of things as it turns out. But when you look at these statements, or when we look at these statements, they basically embody like what it is we strive to do. And they act as like not a corrective tool, not like an absolute rule, but like a guiding, a measure for how we make decisions. Like if we have option A and option B and they're both really, really good, we have something that helps us like kind of orient around which one fills these needs even better. And sometimes that line is so fine that it's really obnoxious, but when it really helps to know what it is you are trying to accomplish. And it's not just about making the coolest goblin you can. It's about making a goblin that, like, looks right in this world, that complements this, like, storybook aesthetic, that, like, feels like, okay, it's a goblin, it's a bad guy, and even though it beat my butt, I'm gonna get him next time. So it's like, it hooks you back in. You want to find out more about it. There's a story about this that draws you back in, and it enriches the world. Like, no matter what it is that we add to the game, no matter how cool it looks, if it's not enriching the world, it's just adding stuff to it.
Right.
Adding stuff to it is a tertiary byproduct of enriching the world. Like, it's not even secondary. Done right, that's gonna happen anyway. But we're not just, like, adding stuff to the game for the sake of adding to it. It's thoughtful, it's measured, and it's oftentimes maddeningly tedious.
I think, too, it's like, what is the point of a pillar? And, you know, I've been writing pillars for Stonehearth as a
for
game.
Hundreds of years.
Yeah, it feels like forever.
For hundreds of years.
And the point of the exercise is so that you end up with a series of statements that help you determine and make choices what should and should not be in your game. And so, like for example, right now, the pillars for Stonehearth are focus on a small group of people who have to optimize their environment in order to flourish. We have a gameplay one that Richard is actually still working on, which is about, you know, making sure that you constantly have, like, nested optimizable consequences, and then there's, like, create emergent stories of warmth, heroism, and mystery. And it's like, if there's a thing in the game that is not in service to these three goals, we have to really examine why is it there and how can we make it fit more to those goals.
Yeah.
And other games have more than 3 pillars, you know, the number of pillars is arbitrary, but the point is that if you have a central tenet, you won't get lost. Like, I feel like we totally got lost with the engineer at some point. Like, we were like, hey, like, we're making this class, like, we think it's really cool, but, like, it doesn't feel right, and we couldn't identify why it didn't feel right, so we got really far down before, you know, you guys told us, well, hey, like, I feel really weird about the turnip shooters, and even then it was like, well, why does that feel wrong?
Yeah, because it's like, on the art side, like, it's a turnip shooter, it's great.
Yeah,
it totally works, it's great.
And I think,
it's great.
You know, if you took it back to those pillars, you'd say that, well, like, the people have to optimize their environment in order to flourish. The turnip shooter feels like a free, like, one-up.
Yeah.
Like, it's too cheap, it's too easy, like, and it's kind of like, you know, you didn't have to earn that turnip shooter in any specific fashion. It didn't mean anything that you now have a magic thing that shoots turnips.
Yeah.
Like, you should have had to earn it, you had to, like, move there. So, you know, just lots of these things, lots of these choices made easier when you have more pillars, super helpful when you bring on more people to your team, too, because, like, it's like, oh, well, how do you communicate what is correct and what is incorrect? Everyone should be able to add things to the game that they want to add to the game, but, like, you know, they shouldn't, like, bark down, like, a super, like, long tree and then get to the bottom and then everyone else is like, yeah, I don't like it because it just feels wrong. Like, that feels terrible as a teammate. So you should have, like, a rubric by, like, okay, make sure your stuff conforms to these ideas, if not to, you know, whatever code thing.
Yeah. And I like the idea of thinking of them as a compass.
Right.
It's like, it's a tool that just, it guides you and it helps you with your decision making so that you're not just making stuff for the sake of making stuff, and that you... In a perfect world, if you have these rules fleshed out and you're, like, abiding by them, in a perfect world, everything comes out, like, you know, it fits for the thing that you're making it, which it's not always the case. It's not to say that these ideas are completely infallible. There's, like, there's a measure here of, like, you have to make a call. You have to be able to make good choices anyway. Like, you can't just be like, well, it does all these things, that's great, because it still has to, like, it still has to fit.
Right.
And you can write hundreds of pillars, but you shouldn't. Fewer, I feel like, is actually better, because then it's like, you know, you start, they stop being, like, functional and start becoming, like, a tedious checklist, and that's not how it feels. That's not how it feels that these should be used. These are really hard to write. This took me, like, a month, and it's just a couple of sentences, but when you think of it in terms of, like, this is something that needs to be universally applicable to art in the game. It can't speak to any one corner of it. So again, like the mood boards, these are addressing, like, tone and purpose and setting and decision making, more of how to make art that fits the vision of the game. Mm-hmm. Which, no matter what happens to the game, the vision has remained really surprisingly, like, solid. It doesn't wiggle around much. The wording may change, but at its heart, it means the same thing every single time.
I know you've also been doing, and now we're way past the hour. I was wondering if maybe we might want to finish with
I thought it would be nice to finish with like some of like the fun stuff that we've been doing
more recently.
This is about shape language, and that's like a whole other. I feel like we could spend a really long time talking about shape language. If any of you guys attended the last time I did a Thursday stream, we worked for a little bit on this scene, which was actually you know what, I can pull up this guy too because it's relevant. Which actually was kind of a...
I love this. Every time you have Mr. Box, like, Chris has named this guy Mr. Box. Like.
So yeah, this is a cartoon that I draw in my slides to help me communicate concepts and ideas, and he's managed to become quite endearing to the rest of the team, and Chris has dubbed him Mr. Box. And in this case, Mr. Box is helping to describe shape language, and it's useful because in this scene that's a lot of what's happening. And it's like the easiest way to think about shape language is using art to communicate an idea without words in a way that gets the point across that you don't have to think too hard about. So it's like in this case, like Mr. Box is a nice solid safe shape. You can communicate things becoming like kind of shaky and kind of like, hey, I'm not in a space that I know, when you start turning things at strange angles or stacking them up in a way that doesn't seem like they support all the time, introducing shapes that don't quite conform to what's safe, and that, you know, it's like, hey, this is tilted at an angle, hey, this is turned on its side, I don't like what's happening here. And like the further you go with that when you compare it to the original, like you're sending, I mean, even expression aside, if you put your thumb over his face and
I love how your art is always telling a story. Like, that is the Hush. Like, that is literally the dude from the Ascendancy in Darkmoor Forest. Like,
he's a creeper.
Yeah.
Total creepazoid. Big shadow monster. But it's like when you know when things are really, really bad, not because someone is running around going, things are really, really bad, but there's evidence in the art style that says, watch out, things are not as safe as they could be. Like, these trees, what are they doing? This twistiness, it's a visual cue. Mm-hmm. It's a clue that plants you in, it gives you clues about what's happening. And again, in a way that isn't just like, we have to generate an NPC to tell you, hey, the Hush is nearby.
Right.
I mean, as fun as it is to, like, you know, pop up a text box that says, I smell a wumpus, it's just like, you know, there are more elegant ways of doing this in a way that, like, doesn't take you out of your adventure, or your Hearthlings out of your adventure. Like, you look over and you see your trapper, like, in a weird patch of forest, or, like, in a really strange ravine in the desert, or, like, on this patch of black ice, and you're like, there's something not good happening over here. And no one has to tell you that. But that's essentially the job of, you know, shape and color language.
It's actually really interesting because, you know, Repeat Pan and Froggy were actually using just one item turned 90 degrees in Frost Feast to communicate.
It says so much.
Everything they wanted to say
so much
about Akinar. Like, Akinar, this, like, random green-haired dude shows up in your camp and he's just like, blah, 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 and, like, he has a quest for you, but, like, he's, you know, looking mild-mannered, trying to be friendly, and then you go over to his camp and you see that his Frost Feast monument is turned by, you know, 45 degrees to everything else in the game, and it's like chilling.
It is.
And you're just like, what?
Especially when
what's going on here? Yeah.
And it's like taking that idea, it's like when I, you know, I spoke a little bit before about how it's like when you first set out, when you first embark, the world is already laid out for you. And that's a way that you create that contrast. And it's like, it's not just a matter of being able to say, the world is scary, everything is scary, and everything is terrible. But it calls attention especially to the effect that Hearthlings have on their environment. If you think about, like, the world of Hearth as being like, hey, here's, like, a toy box, a blocks analogy. It's like you go in there and it's this room and you can set things up just so. Well, that room isn't set up when you get there. So I think of, like, an untouched world, not literally as, like, someone has just dumped out the bucket of blocks, but that same kind of, like, randomness to the orientation, and that when your Hearthlings are there, they're essentially putting it in order. So you can see where they've been by, like, you know, the houses in neat, like, city blocks, and, you know, stockpiles in neat rows, and the trees that have been, like, manicured, and the way that crops are grown. It's like you see the settlement. It's where we already take for granted that everything is on a grid. Now that has a purpose, as to say this is safe, this is where the Hearthlings are, this is where they've been. And as they explore out the world, having that effect cover more of the world also helps, like, create a tool of communication of where you've been and what that's meant. And then again, it's like you see the rest of the world and like, hey, what kind of shapes in there can we use to communicate like strangeness? And not necessarily like fear and terror, but like just like, you know, things are not already laid out nice and neat. Things are on an angle. Things are like, how do I reach that? I mean, no matter what happens, the world is grid-based. It all applies the same rules, but there are things that you can do to it that make it feel a bit more unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
And this was kind of a beginning of this, like, hey, so here's basically a town as you expect it, as you see it. And then it's like, and really nothing in this scene has changed, except I was really too lazy to draw these trees as voxels, because that takes forever. And they're turned. That's it. They're just turned. The rocks in the ground are turned. That's all. And it creates like so much visual contrast between these two things. Taken even further, you can imagine what that means in terms of like larger rock formations, or, you know, maybe how would we approach a bog or a patch of brambles or something like that.
Sure.
And what would we be doing if we want to like draw attention, especially to like something really important in the distance. We're introducing like different kinds of tools in order to send signals and call attention.
And I think too, like, Richard has also talked about this from a gameplay perspective. Like for example, one of the thoughts he's evolving is, could he marry a gameplay concept to this art idea and be like, hey, like, around your town, where the fog of war is not, in fact, where you've cleared the, like, around your town, near your hearth, near where your houses are, like, you know, you have a bonus. It's safer, like, you know, there's less monsters, like, literally fewer monsters. Maybe your dudes, like, you know, get some bonus for being nearby. Like, as you get out into the world, like, not only does it look more dangerous, it also is more dangerous. Mm-hmm. And you know, stacking bonuses, who knows? Like, there's lots of interesting ways that this could influence, and that the gameplay could influence this, and
yeah, like, actually make it meaningful. And that's ultimately the job of everything, to like run together and do all of these things seamlessly in a way that you guys don't have to stop and learn about, because you just, like, if you feel like you just understand it, then we did our jobs right.
Yes.
Like, the cool, both the awesome thing and the miserable thing about really good design is that it's invisible. Like, we are going out of our way to be invisible. And it takes a shocking amount of preparation and work and time to do that on purpose. At the very least, I think this has amazing implications for a far more elegant way we would handle Fog of War. Rather than just covering the map in black, even though you can still totally see what's out there, yeah. It's really not a mystery. Doing things that, like, shake up the visual language. Yeah, and other than that, I've just got some fun explorations of, like, sceneries and things that we can...
Yeah, I think, like, the interior spaces and some of your big landscapes, those were really, really cool.
Yeah, so, like, when I came to these, it was exploring in terms of, like, very simple block language, like, how to create, like, ideal scenes that may already be represented within the game in an unfinished state, but point to, like, where could we go with this if we could do whatever we wanted, which, right. You know, we can't, but you don't answer those questions by pulling your punches, essentially. So it's like, these spaces may not be incredibly possible so far, but, you know, it's just the idea, like, how do you capture the essence, and how far do you really need to go? Like, how much mileage can you get out of a cube?
Right.
And what do you do with it how far do you get with it before it starts to, like, want for anything other than that? And, you know, really you get tons of mileage out of a cube. The biggest thing about these explorations is, like, yeah, really simple shape language, and, like, mostly just explorations in, like, what color and light do to create mood and atmosphere. And even though, again, essentially these images are all made of incredibly simple things, they don't suffer because of it. Like, it doesn't make this bedroom here feel any less cozy, or this workshop here feel any less busy and interesting. It's like, this to me feels like, one, this has got to be really hot in here.
Right.
If you've ever been in a pottery studio, it's like it's an equal mix of, like, kind of slimy and crusty all the time, and, like, uncomfortably warm by the fire.
Right.
But it's like, it also smells like wet clay, but I miss that. I loved pottery. But, like, you know, creating these scenes that have that kind of essence to it, and, like, really nailing down in very simple terms first before going, we need all of these things to tell that story, when, in fact, you really don't. This is also like beginning to set up. I know it was raised earlier about like, hey, what are our final color palettes? We don't have final color palettes yet, but when you start like tooling around in this department, you can start seeing like, hey, wow, we're really underutilizing purple. I never thought I'd say that, but it just really makes these greens pop, and it makes the walls feel warmer. Or like, hey, what if we could like blush things with red a little bit? It adds richness to it. It adds like, it makes that stone feel like more gold and more burnt terracotta. Even though it's like, it's just like, it's a unifier and things like that. Like, hey, teal actually does make this look beautiful. It's not obnoxious and things like that.
I just want to crawl into these scenes and live there. Like, I think too,
tiny close, cozy bedrooms.
We have like a long time ago, Tom did interiors, but they weren't nearly this dense. And I think that the game's interiors feel kind of sparse by comparison now that I've seen this. And it's like, one thing it means to me is like, okay, how do we create more like life on the insides of our houses and stuff?
And I think part of that is like, really paying attention to how much space the assets do take up, because I feel like, again, these are all created on islands, and when you put them all together they work, but they don't do this. And all these things are created in one scene, but it's like, if you were to take this and go, oh, hey, the kiln needs to be this big if it's going to take up this much space and this kind of floor plan, and we need to make sure it's centered this way so you can put it here next to a wall. Whereas right now, if you wanted to like put a big, awesome trunk in front of a bed, like, the size is never going to feel like this, for one. And it's like, the proportions just aren't thought of in advance. So that's the other thing that's really fun about like doing studies like this, is it's like, it starts creating those kinds of like recipes and rules to follow in order to help like actually craft scenes like this.
I think Pandemic got really close with his renders. Well, not really close, but Pandemic did an amazing job with his renders.
Yeah.
Like, and creating that sense of intimacy.
And closeness. Yeah. And it's like, everything feels like it's the right size, both for the Hearthlings and for the world. Yeah. Whereas, right now, in-game, I don't feel like we're there yet. And, like, I think, like, for me, like, the biggest offender of this is like, I keep talking about the park bench, but it makes me so mad.
Really?
Because I like moved all the flowers and I moved all the berry bushes, and I'm like, yes, my town will be cute. This will be a neat park. I'm putting a bench right here. And the bench is like this big. I'm looking at the iconic for it going, it's going to be amazing. And when I deployed it, I'm just like, I'm gonna break something. It was so wrong. Because it's like, I love the design of it, and what I wanted it to do in my head and in my heart was just completely unsatisfied by like how it was realized within the space.
I see.
Like, it was just too tiny. It needs to take up more space.
Like, it looks like it should be a
it looks like it should be bigger.
Bench,
it looks like it should be like bigger and chunkier, and instead it's like, boop.
It is really like a park chair.
It's a wide park chair. So that's part of this, like, hey, we need to have like some logic to how big these things are. That way, when we do have them, you have more of an expectation of like how much space that's going to take up, and like it will take up enough space, like in these scenes, to feel satisfying and to not like leave huge obnoxious spaces, etc. Like more art, more types of color choices and things like that. Little symbols of their individual cultures. Which is super important. That's a fantastic tool for storytelling for each of the biomes. This was a fast experiment with the foothills, like borrowing shapes that push verticality without utilizing slopes and points, and also just like chiseling things into the mountains and like drawing interesting like colors and patterns on the ground to help kind of break up all the green. And it's like, it should be said that these drawings happened at a scale that was probably, I'm trying to zoom out here, probably closer to like this, and they all happened very quickly.
Right.
So none of these represent like a final concept or even like a final art style, and these are more like shape and color experiments. It's like, hey, how far can we get with simple cube shapes? Where do we push, and like what do we do with like simple cube shapes and color and orientation, essentially, and go fast. And the idea of these is to also help us hone in on like tinier pockets of things that want attention, but these are the broad strokes that help unify those experiments, instead of starting with the tiny parts and then fanning out and realizing that we have no idea where the edge of the canvas even is.
Sure.
So it's like, when I look at this, I see a lot of things in my mind's eye that it's like, yes, we're gonna go there, but I have to remember to like communicate. It's like, no, it's all not here yet. It's like, clearly we want to do more with the ground cover, and definitely better. Again, it's far faster to draw pointy trees than it is to draw voxel trees. I hate these trees with a burning passion. Like, every time I see them, I'm like, you're wrong. But having them march up the slopes like that, it feels up. Like, what do we put in a scene like this that really pushes, like, mountains, verticality, up, 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 up? And once again, if you think about this in terms of, like, who it is that settles here, the ascendancy, it's only going up. Like, having...
the stock market will only ever get cooler.
Like, for me, it's like, hey, if we take that into account and then look at where it is that they would choose to settle... Upshapes.
Yeah.
And that's that sounds like an unintelligent thing, but I don't know of anything more appropriate for that kingdom other than upshapes.
Taylene says, I want to explore that cave. The cave needs a bear.
That cave needs a cave baroness.
Yeah. Definitely.
I love the monsters. I just want to get back to the monsters all the time. And by contrast, this was an exploration of the desert, and, like, for me, like, there's a lot of, like, this grayness and, like, vastness in a way that it feels, like, barren, but it's also covered in things. And, like, I've always had, like, this disharmony with the way our desert looks, except at night.
Yes.
I love it at night. It's so pretty. But during the daytime, I'm just like, this is very taupe. So it's like I was thinking about on one hand where the forest is pushing verticality, the desert I wanted to push lateral shapes, so like more on the horizon, because it's like, okay, so the desert is vast. What can we do to like make it beautiful because it is vast? Like, how do we treat the sand? Like, do we have like actual like flowing like gusts of winds or like static waves in the sand, like an ocean? And I actually googled ocean of sand, and I got like these beautiful bleached desert scenes, and I'm like, what, this kind of like golden haze that is like, it's so entrancing, and it's so beautiful, and it's like, let's like smash things like more down into the ground, like lower, and even like in our acacia trees they already do that. So it's like trees in the forest, they grow up, they grow tall, they come not to points because I hate them, but it's like up shapes.
Winnie's like pine trees are gorgeously stacked.
They're
like birthday cakes.
They're like birthday cakes. Yeah, birthday cakes is a very good analogy, in fact. Whereas in the desert, it's like, hey, things are lower to the ground, so that when you see things on the whole, when you tip your camera and you look out at the horizon, it just feels like expanse and very beautiful and very harmonious. It doesn't feel like things are just jutting up all willy-nilly. And then again, like the color of the sky, like that cyan is just like super important, and how it affects the gold. Let's see what else we have. This is like a huge like, hey, what, like, let's just do all the things all at the same time. Like, let's go for like kind of a ruddy canyon sort of thing with like the vegetation studded river at the bottom. And again, just simple shapes and just color to create atmosphere and mood, and see if it's like, is it begging for assistance in any way, or is it still possible to create a captivating scene only with just a few elements and touches?
Sure.
Like, can we use minimalism effectively to communicate a very complicated idea, like a field of flowers? Do we literally have like a voxel flower for every single thing, which would get like incredibly busy? Or can we do something with like the way color fades to the distance, and then how that like breaks up into the foreground to where it's like, oh my gosh, it's not that the terrain is yellow, it's that there are just that many flowers, and that when I look out that far, it's all I can see. What is this place? And it's like I painted this little circuit flower guy here, but it also just looks like a dude doing this.
I see what you're doing this. I think it's awesome. I like, and I really want to know what it is. Like, it's like, oh, there's this field of flowers, this gorgeous meadow. It's almost heavenly, that kind of radiance. Mm-hmm. Like, and then there's a Nazca painting of a dude going, yeah. Like, and now I want to know more.
It's like, who made this?
Yeah, exactly.
And you're just like, hey, why did you paint that thing? I don't know. But I mean, this also speaks not just to like an exercise to like reduce complexity down to like very simple ideas, but also to like once again, like using only simple shapes and tools are we at any risk of losing our ability to communicate? Not just a place where you go and dig things up and plant houses, but like a world that has mystery and intrigue like embedded into it. Like when you see this scene, is the first thing you think of, man, it sure is made out of voxels, or is it, what is this place? Why is it like this? Is it even okay to build a house here? Am I gonna like make an elder god mad?
God. Maybe he's a god of balance. Like it's like, and when there's nothing, he's just confused.
Yeah, it's just like, oh.
It's good stuff.
And then lastly, along those same lines, is like very few elements, and this is like a much more intimate vignette of like one particular thing, whereas the others represent more of like a whole thing. I wanted to see like a bunch of different types of materials all together and just play up that interaction with each other, and like using just a few things to create a scene that inherently has a narrative, even though it's just made out of cubes, and just utilizing color.
Yeah, Tom and I were talking about this yesterday. I always assumed that like a Hearthling would be about this tall. Like a cave would be about this big, and I think he wasn't sure if he was looking at a much smaller thing, but yeah, like I look at this thing on the ground and I'm like, what left that there? Like, you know how there's slime molds that like exist in patterns, and so like they make these like really kind of bizarrely structured looking patterns in the ground, and you're like, I'm like not okay with this. Like,
I don't know why I don't know why this is here.
Right. But like it's like what kind of species of grass is doing this? It's very constructive.
Like, why is it doing that?
Yeah.
Did somebody do this on purpose? Was this left by somebody? Is it a fungus that just grows in this way? Like, we talked a million streams ago about ogre art, about how, like, every clan of ogre is, like, they just have this ancestral memory of how they dig their tunnels, and if you, like, look at it in slice mode, every clan of ogre, like, has a distinct pattern that they carve into a mountainside, and that's essentially ogre art. So it's like, is this maybe something else, like, a strange type of, like, of earthworm? And it's like, you don't ever get to obtain said earthworm, but when you see the patterns they leave, it means, hey, this is really fertile ground, and whatever I plant here, like, holy cow, look at this pink tree. Right. Like, and that's just one version of a story you could tell about this scene, which is the point of its creation. It's like, again, hey, it's only made of blocks and color. And, you know, it utilizes angle and, like, soft lighting and things like that, but, like, the arrangement of it, even with those very few elements, it does not stop you from creating a world that is effective as a place where, you know, you not only, like, dig things up and make your houses, but, like, you house stories there. Mm-hmm. Like, ideally, I would want, like, tiny little vignettes like this to be possible for players to discover, like, whatever form they take. And maybe it's, like, a combination of things, and when you see them all together, it like, creates a different kind of story. I mean, this is a pink tree, a glyph in the ground, a certain type of moss, and it's overlooking an ocean. What if you varied those things up? What changes about it? But yeah, that's... Oh, and we're back to here. So yeah, that's...
It's been a super dense January for you.
It's been a very packed January. Like everything here, plus a lot of things that you're not even seeing, were all crammed into a month. But that's unfair to say, because in fact the preparations for all of this stuff began well in advance. It's just January of this year happened to be where we, like, put a focusing laser on it and explored what actually happens when you apply all of this stuff. And it probably raised thousands of more questions than it solved, but that is ultimately the purpose of this exercise, is exposing all of that stuff and creating avenues for meaningful exploration, not just, like, blue skying. Mm-hmm. It's not to say that blue skying is useless. Like, you don't gain a lot from, like, only doing sensible things all the time without having, like, an aspirational vision. It's not to say, like, this is absolutely, like, a thing that we are going to do no matter what it takes, but it's to guide us into asking questions that we would not have thought of asking in the first place. Sure. And looking at our work in a way that is not, because again, we look at our game so much, I think we see more to it than there is, and there are things about it that we inherently take for granted. We're biased. We can't help it. So a thing about this is that it freshens it up again for us. It makes it new, and it helps us to look at it in a new way, mm-hmm. which going forward helps us to, like, actually make decisions for, like, how do we make it better? Like, again, a year ago, if you'd asked me, it's like, well, we'll just do a color pass and it'll be fine, which is drastically different from where we've wound up. But that's just because it's like, hey, what if we do like shoot for the moon and see what happens?
I would actually be kind of interested, if you feel comfortable, showing like the screenshot and like the painting that you did on top of the screenshot, sort of like for the light.
Just the environment?
Yeah, sure. Like,
it's got the Hearthlings in it. Yeah. I've got the version that doesn't have them in it.
If it's complicated, that's fine.
No, it's not. It's not. But, if you give me a minute, I can dump that onto public.
Yeah. Or even the one with the Hearthlings, I just feel like those are your Hearthlings. Those are the dudes from the spot
okay,
art, right? Like they're just very.
Give me just 1 second, because those are all in a folder, but they're not in this folder.
Gotcha.
So it will literally take me a second though, because it's all pretty well organized. I will be right back.
Cool.
We can finish off with that, because I think we're past the hour now.
Yes, we definitely are. Thanks for hanging out for so long.
Yeah, no problem.
And thank you guys for hanging out for so long. While Allie is off grabbing these two pieces of art, like, do you have any more questions for either of us? I can answer at least some of them, although she is much, 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 much more qualified to answer all the art-related questions. Eki Gamer asks, is there ever going to be a snow biome? Yes, we have always wanted to add glaciers to the game. Glaciers are the native home of the Northern Alliance. And before we do that, we want to go back. Before we add the stuff that we were hoping to add at the end of last year, like the Magmasmith and the Geomancer and the Northern Alliance, and Titans and Rabbits and all those other things, we actually need to go back very badly and do a thoughtful pass on all of the existing gameplay systems. So, my goal is, yes, there should totally be a snow biome, but I don't know exactly when. Let's see. Other questions. What is my favorite thing about Stonehearth, or plan for the future that I can talk about? I have so many favorite things about Stonehearth. Like, I mean, the easy answer is I really love seeing stuff that you guys build. Like, some of my favorite moments are, like, looking at builds and save games from Kythandra, for example. Like, and seeing what they've been able to do with all of the furniture and the building tools we gave them, and it like, just completely blows my mind. Of the things that are in the game, and so, like, on that same level, like, one of my favorite things about Stonehearth is actually playing Frostfeast and building little houses that have heaters inside of them, because, you know, it's like, it feeds this, like, gameplay desire, like, oh, I want to make this cozy, like, and it's also super exciting because, like, it was built by someone in the community. And if it's something, like, actually in the game itself, let's see, favorite thing inside Stonehearth.
Cornbread?
Cornbread's pretty
Goblins,
good.
actually.
Goblins? Yeah. I really like the Rise Children, like, red and gold aesthetic.
It is really pretty.
Like, the red doors and the gold houses, and then, like your tier 2 templates for them. Like, those tier 2 templates look like they're very intricate. Like, the Hearthlings all have to run all over all the stairs in order to get them.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was part of their goal, is to be like, hey, you can set these down in a lot of different ways, and you can, like, create intricacy, and it's not just like, well, I've built this template, now I have no more use for it. Yeah. It's like, you get lots of uses out of them. It'd be nice to find a way to do that with the Ascendancy style houses. Some of the ones that I've been playing with the space considerations have actually had more dimensionality to them from different sizes, instead of just like, here is the front, but they also have, like, cool things about them when you look at them at the side and at the back.
Mm-hmm. So then the current plan for 21 is traits and assorted, like, backgrounds. There will always be assorted, because there's always a performance problem that we are fixing. Yes. And there's always an art problem that we're fixing, or an art thing we're exploring. 22, we haven't really thought too much about it yet. I think a lot of it has to do with where we're going to land with the gameplay stuff and some of the art decisions. But I know that next on the queue is going to, like, definitely sometime in the near future, or something that we definitely want to do, is we want to take another look at the building UX. Like, now that we have Nikki, like, actively working on the game, like, how do we make the builder more intuitive to use and less painful? And another thing we also want to do is Richard really wants to revisit the economy, like, how much everything costs, and, like, how soon you unlock stuff, and, like, the value of money and merchants and traders and all of this. So, like, I don't know if either of those things will definitely be 22, but, like, they're things that are currently on the table. All right. Did you have those two other pictures?
I do.
So, for context for these two pictures, one of the things we've been asking a lot is, like, hey, what is up with light? What is up with, like, what can we do with the green? Like, like a lot of these things that Ali has talked about are like, hey, these are aspirational concepts, but like, what does that actually mean when applied to a scene of Stonehearth? And so this is a screenshot of Stonehearth, which was crafted with your loving eye. Like, my towns don't ever look like this.
Well, this was specifically to create a cute scene to be used for an aspirational painting.
It's adorable. It's really, really cute.
I don't know how they get by. There's not a lot of function happening here, but it's the ascendancy, so I'm just gonna call it that.
Yeah, like, I want these houses as templates, and like, anyway.
Well, good news, they are.
Yeah.
They are templates.
Really?
Yeah, I've saved all of them. They're just for
sweet.
my games. Like, here's like a carpenter house. There's like a loft bed on the inside, so it's like it's really cozy and cute in there. Little sign dangling. I think this was originally going to be an herbalist house, but the floor plan I'm having trouble reconciling it with. But what's cool about these is, again, these were made with the space considerations, so they're a lot larger than the houses I would usually build, but because of the way the walls have been chopped up and kind of put together, they still have that, like, coziness to them that I was like, hey, is that going to be put in danger if we have to have, like, a floor plan that is X by X? If I want my Hearthlings to, like, be super happy all the time.
No, it really is supposed to go the other way.
Yeah.
Build the house, and then we will fix the calculation to work with the houses that look beautiful.
Yeah, but it's like also just like it's fun to, because I would not have thought of making houses like this without that consideration, which is what I was kind of speaking to a bit before. It's like, on one hand you can look at it like a constraint, on another hand really cool things tend to fall out of constraints, and it's just like I always have a fun time like seeing what solutions present themselves when you have like, when you essentially, you can look at it as a constraint or you can look at it like a known. Instead of like, sky's limit, you can do whatever you want, which is like, that's so many things.
Right. And
you tend to like settle on one thing and go, yes, this all the time. Constraints can be a fun way to mix it up.
So anyway, even with this awesome, amazingly, beautifully constructed picture, there's still things on here that are like nagging me. Like we've talked so often about the ground. Like, oh my god, why is this whole thing one color? That doesn't feel right somehow. Like, it's like the whole ground is made out of green plastic. And you know, like the fences are really cute, but like, you know, they kind of stand out. Like,
yeah, there's a visual density to them that like catches my eye and will not let it go.
And why does our fog of war just look like a giant sheet of black? That, like, yeah, it's like we painted all the trees black back.
These trees are really dark, and also like the background is so insanely busy. It's like, I'm not sure what I should be looking at. It's like,
right. So it's like, if you painted over this, if you could imagine the light the way you wanted, if you could imagine the textures the way that you wanted, like, what would it look like?
Yeah, and that's several days of tooling around on it later, it wound up here. And it's like, the biggest differences made to it were like loosening up this background a ton. So like, you can see the originals, like everything is so stacked together, is so close, and it's just like, there's so much visual intensity here going on that I don't even know what I should be looking at. And it's like, when you break all that up, when you open it all up, the world suddenly feels huge. It doesn't feel tiny and condensed all in one spot. And the way the Hearthlings arrange their towns suddenly feels meaningful within that world. Like, that's where the closeness is. That's because of them. And that's like an element to their warmth and to their presence. So there was that. There's like adding like color in the atmosphere. So it's not just blackness. And again, like, this is just the same old black trees with like just a brush over it to like fake that atmospheric perspective, and it pushes it back, and again, it just makes the world feel like, when I look at the difference between these two backgrounds, I feel the world like let out a sigh of relief. It's just like, oh, thank God, I was so tense. So like, those are big ones, like softening the edges of things, like maybe introducing like a bevel to the voxels, going into our assets with more of an I-2 shape language instead of just like, well, that sure is a tree.
I think, like, but so talking about the bevel, I think puts the cart before the horse. Like, for me, that conversation is about, how do we make the voxels look less like they're stabbing me in the face?
Yeah, and that's
like,
the main thing. That's the main thing. It's like
if you want to make this feel like a storybook, what would you do if you were illustrating it as a children's book, as you have illustrated children's books?
Yes, actually, and like, you know, softness, and it's not just that it's stabbing me in the face, it's just that this feels more like something I can reach out and touch than this does. This is a 3D object with shading and lighting and all those things, but it lacks the tactileness that this has, just because it does have like that extra little bit of realism to it. Like, I feel like I could like put my thumb on that edge.
Right.
And it also has that way of like catching light and making it feel like more planted in the world instead of just like, here is an object that's just like thunk in this space. And it's just like, okay. Simplifying like that repeat. It's like, could we add in more types of segments of walls and randomize it to like, you know, simulate that organicness, that crumbliness that just, again, it makes the world feel a little less like aggressively math art and a little bit more like, you know, intent and accident and spontaneity in a world that is still essentially mathematically arranged. And the same thing for like how you do like a dirt path.
Right.
But here again, we're like turning things on angles. And it's like kind of the main thing about it was just like reduction. Mm-hmm. Like when I first came into this project, I looked at this and was like, okay, what do I need to add? And a few days later, it was like, you know, things were added, but mostly it was just loosening it up and refocusing.
I think it's interesting because we've been creating our models like by themselves, and it gets back to your comment about the park bench. Like when you're working on silkweed, you're like, hey, of course it needs leaves. Mm-hmm. Like what plant doesn't have leaves? But when you actually look at it composed in a scene, it's like, okay, now I'm no longer concerned about silkweed as this one object. Yeah. How does it look in cubicle together? It's like, oh, well, now it's in this space.
When you look at it, yeah, and that's like what makes these so amazing as tools is like when you look at them all together, you're like, oh, I didn't need to go that far.
Yeah.
Because it does the job just well enough to this point, and I'm not like, you know, this is so busy, this is so crazy looking, it's so repetitive. Our eyeballs love repetition. So when stuff like this happens, we just gotta look at it. So it's like, how do we...
because there might be, like, a bug in there. There might be spiders.
There might be spiders.
You need to
Our
make
brains
sure
are hardwired to look for patterns. Like, we can't help it. So it's like, what can we do to simplify that, to cut that down, to loosen it up? And, like, even this doesn't even really represent, like, the full length to which things still need to be pushed. Like, the green has taken steps forward here.
Well, it is no longer one giant color. Like,
but,
yes.
We've yet to really go in and explore, like, how would we approach different kinds of ground cover, mm-hmm. or different ways that we would break this up? What is the interaction between this and objects that are set into it? From a visual standpoint, never mind, like, the what it is standpoint. These are some mushrooms. That's a random aside.
No, we don't have mushrooms.
No, we really don't, and we should, because look how cute they are. They're square.
Oh my god.
They're square and they're blue. What does it mean?
It means they're less poisonous than the red ones.
You know, that actually makes sense to me. Though, honestly, like, I think, aside from just the fact that overall, like, this scene, when I look back at it, is uniformly, like, yellow-green. Mm-hmm. The brown is even kind of greenish. And when I look at this, it's like, now we're playing with blue, and we're playing with red, and we're playing with pink, and we're just, like, not a whole lot about it changes, but it just feels like so much lighter and brighter and airier than this scene over here. But honestly, I think my favorite touch here, if nothing else, is the lit windows. Like, if I had to say, like, one thing that made just so much difference is, like, it's the difference between these feeling like little haunted shacks, which when I first built them, I would never have thought of that in a million years. But these just feel like so alive because they have that to them. Like, it's like that little pop of light. They're looking out at the sky or reflecting something from within.
I think that's the weird thing. It's like, because I had the same, like, go back to the screenshot. Mm-hmm. This is one of the cutest Stonehearth villages I've ever seen. Like, and I make Stonehearth villages, like, every day. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh my god, it's so cute. These are such cute houses. Everyone is like, hey, do you have these templates? Like, oh my god, these templates. And then you switch over to the windows and suddenly these look like haunted shacks. Like, what's going
it's
on
true.
Here?
I was really betrayed by it. And now when I go, because, like, again, this is my playtest save. And I'm like, my cute town. I built a little 2-story one. It's so cute. And then it's like, after doing this, I go back to my cute town and I'm just like,
no!
Who did this?
What have you done?
Where have the...
It's like how you taught us how to make mug cakes last Friday, and like now I know
ruined
I can make
everything
a cake in the microwave.
That was really good. I'm so glad I don't own a microwave. Oh my gosh.
But yeah, so I feel like that's the goal of an aspirational, though. That's the goal. That's exactly the goal of something like this, to look at this and be like, I didn't know I wanted this, but now I want this with, like, every molecule of my being. Like, what can we do to make our game look more like this?
Yeah, because initially it's like looking at this as like an aspirational target allows me to look at this and go, okay, here's the chasm that we can jump. Whereas when I first arranged the scene and took this screenshot, it's like, I'm fine with this. Mm-hmm. I'm used to looking at this. This I feel like is pretty darn good work. I love the way these houses look. This is a cute. This, as far as I'm concerned, this is a really cute town.
Yeah, what I see when I look at the screenshot is what you have done to make the town really cute. And then I see things that are like I said, like the grass, and it's like, oh, well, we just haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
And then I look at the other one, and it's like, oh, but everything's now adorable. Like, everything's now touchable. Oh no.
And like, and it's also like everything is considered as a part of the whole, rather than developed off into a thing and then you put it in the scene and you go, no. And then you develop it off in the thing, you put it in the scene and you go, no. And it's not to say that you couldn't at some point take different things and develop them off in a corner, because after a certain point, what this starts to do is set down rules that you can use to construct that style guide that we mentioned before. Like, mood boards, not a style guide. Aspirational art begins to like put down the things, like as you start seeing things and patterns and habits that you continuously bring to these pictures, you're like, hey, that might be a cornerstone of what makes Stonehearth's art look like Stonehearth's art. Mm-hmm. And that becomes a thing that composes part of a style guide. And once you have something like that, you have, much like the pillars, like a body of like best practices that when you go off into a corner to make an asset, like down the road, it would be really, really slow if we had to make a painting every time we wanted to try out a new bush. Right. But if through the process of making these aspirational targets, we built like, essentially, the Bible of best practices, you can just follow those rules, and you'll probably need some tweaks, but reliably create something that looks like it belongs in the world, that looks like it is the art of Stonehearth. So like, this is helping us. This is a framing tool. This is an aspirational target, and this is like setting down groundwork for like what it means to be the art of Stonehearth. Mm-hmm. And like, applying like a lot of thoughtfulness to this.
I also think that the great part here, and we've talked about this a lot, but want to call it out just for the stream, is I stopped seeing this as a voxel game. I stopped seeing it's like when you look at Impressionism and you're like, aha, that is an Impressionist painting or whatever, and then you're like, no, this is a painting of a bunch of girls who are like doing ballet. Yeah. And like, now this is a scene to me. This is not like a really cute scene inside a voxel game. This is just a scene that you might get from any storybook that is created with simple shapes that happen, in the case of the roofs, to be voxels. Yeah. And that's magical. And it's a different level. And
that's really very essential, because it's not like, I mean, we can like drop things into the world all the time that are just like, sure is a cool shaped mesh, but it's like, at the end of the day, we're not getting away from the fact that our game is grid based, that our building system is voxel based. So it's like, what's the harm in seeing what we can do on the 1-to-1 scale anyway, where it's like, honestly, like, I try to passive this where the roofs are smoothed out and it's not nearly as cute to me. And I don't know why that is, and it's really alarming to me, because it's like, I thought for sure, it's like, now that'll be the thing that makes us stop looking at this and going like, well, this is just another voxel game. In fact, it detracted from it. So there's something to that scale where it's, instead of like, we're like trying to deny that this is what we are at our core, we're trying to bring out the best in it as the core of what we are going for. Mm-hmm. And the more we support that and the more we prop that up, the more lush and wonderful and Stonehearthy it's going to feel, and the less like we're just like putting a curtain in front of it and going, don't look over here, it's not a voxel game, because it's, I mean, that's silly. So again, with simple shapes and color, what can you get away with?
Yes.
Quite a bit, in fact.
It is amazing.
And this was a very, very heartening exercise, actually. Like, I remember starting this out just being like, I'm gonna have to paint so many things, and like, we're gonna have to shake this up so much. And the first thing I did was paint out the background, and was just like, that was like a switch getting flipped. Like, the answer isn't more.
Sure.
And then like taking that further into areas like the fence and areas like and the walkway wasn't there before, but it's like, hey, we don't have tons of time to go in and decorate the ground. What can I do to the ground to like help start expressing that idea? So it's like, hey, let's paint like an aspirational walkway instead of just like a dirt path that is one thing and it just repeats over and over and over again, like how would that interact with the terrain around it? How would we represent a pattern inside of it if we could like create variety and imply that kind of like spontaneous complexity of like brickwork, or cartoony brickwork, or cobblestones I think is a better one, because I think bricks would be like more evenly spaced in,
right,
whereas this is much more of like a cobbled, beaten kind of like earthy tier 1 pathway.
I walked on this until all the loose dirt came off, and these are the rocks that were left.
These are the rocks that were left.
Yeah. Well, cool. Hey, so Allie made all of these paintings in like a month. We were like, hey, like what could you do if you had a month to paint things? So thank you for painting them. They're fabulous, and I think like the whole team is super excited about them, and I hope that you guys are excited about them too. And yeah, we are closing in on the 2-hour mark, so I think...
Yes, we are. These streams go very fast.
Yeah,
they really do.
It's so much fun to hang out with you guys, so thank you for joining us, and thank you for sending us your questions and encouragement and thoughts. I really do... I'm really glad we can continue to have at least quarterly streams in the morning, and just touch base and make sure that you know where we are and we know where you are.
And it is like, for me, it's just super fun to be back in like the AM stream, even like again because like I loved hanging out in the mornings and doing the Wednesday streams and everything. So it's like, on one hand, I feel like this is going to be a better opportunity for everybody that's been coming to the Wednesday streams to like get an even wider grasp on like the bigger picture of what's happening in Stonehearth, instead of like small things that are week to week. Because even a lot of things that we worked on during our Wednesday streams, because of the way priorities would shift and the things that we would come to focus on, they didn't always get to just like immediately go into the game and be a thing, because it's like, even at that time, it's like all this stuff is up in the air and we're not really talking about these broader concepts, so it doesn't communicate, it doesn't translate it quite as well. So it's like, now you guys get like, not just like, hey, we're gonna make monsters today, but like, hey, here's like the big picture of what we're doing with art, and then later on it's like with engineering and with design and with other disciplines that are gonna come and talk quarterly about not just like one tiny corner of what's happening in Stonehearth, but these huge, broader, widely reaching, like big, super huge game affecting things.
Right. So yeah. So thanks for joining us. We miss you guys. Come hang out with us on the discourse. We're always there. And it's been a pleasure. And it's just always good to see you, like all your names. It's like, it's very neat. Oh, we will be at PAX East. I don't know how much that is relevant for this particular audience, but if you want to come find us at PAX East in Boston at the beginning of March, we will be there with our booth and a whole bunch of buttons and some lanyards. And we'd love to see you there. We'd love to hang out. Okay.
All right, I guess that's it. We got to go back to work now. So you guys have an awesome, right?
Yeah, I know.
That's a. Can we just stay in here and no?
We get to go back to work and make more games.
I know,
so,
right?
Like...
Darn, dang it! It's like I can't even say it with a straight face, because it's like, man, I sure do have to like draw adorable icons today. I'm so excited about the traits icons. I'm really happy with the direction on that, and we'll hopefully have stuff to share on that super soon, or you'll just see them in the next alpha.
Yes.
But like, yeah, we sadly do have to bring it to a close. So thanks everybody so much for tuning in, and I hope you guys all have an amazing the rest of your day or evening wherever you may be.
Yes. See you in a bit.